Last lecture, we're talking about the patterns and distribution of alcohol and substance abuse. And we talk about prevalence, we talk about new cases. So what is prevalence? What is incidence? This lecture, I'm going to introduce you the concept in an epidemiological sense. So both incidence and prevalence are rates. What is rates? Rates is a number of cases over population risk. So this concept will come back over and over again throughout the course. But number of cases, what's the cases, right? It's very difficult to identify caseness. And throughout the case, we're talking about measurement issues, so you can actually know how to measure cases. And we're talking about the screening tools, measurement tools, diagnosis tools, and the validity and a lot of the concept, epidemiological concept will be used here. But for in this case, we can simply apply people who, for example, who we want to know the cannabis use, whoever use cannabis, and people at risk. So that will generate a rate. And so incidence, there are multiple concept about incidence. Here, I'm only cover two basic incidence concept. And so for new cases, incidence is talking about new cases that arise from a healthy population during a fixed period of time. So what's this mean? So for example, we're talking about cannabis use. I mentioned about in the US survey for the 12th grader, and the new cannabis use can be only 5%, but the prevalence is 78%. So we're going to talk about cumulative incidence and incidence density. So what's a cumulative incidence rate? So thinking about accumulation, how many cases can accumulate during period of time? So it estimates the probability of outcome of event. So for example, the episode of alcohol use over a specific period of time. When we talk about incidence, always involve the time element to it, either 1 month, 1 year, or lifetime. And proportion of the population at risk who can develop the disease using that specific time. And the range is 0 to 1. For example, after 911, the alcohol use disorder has been increasing. So we're looking at the 312 adults living in 5 miles around the World War Trade Center, and I interview them. And 82 meet criteria for AUD. So 45 cases occurred during the year after disaster, and 26 were first onset. So the 1 year accumulated incidence is 26 over 228 people. So it's 11%. So the potential problem of the fixed cohort means in the new denominator, there are 312 adults, and attrition can affect the numerators. Lost cases can often bias the subgroup because your lost cases, you don't know those people develop AUD or not. So what is prevalence? Prevalence is proportion of the individual who have the disease at a specific point of time. Like you cut the history right now, how many people get that particular disease? That means you have new disease, recurrent disease, and chronic disease, all including in the cases. In epidemiology, we're talking about point estimates, period estimates, and lifetime. So point estimates is the proportion of the individual who have disease during a specific time, for say today or September 15th or at that date. And period prevalence is the proportion of people who have the disease during a specific time period, such as 6 months, 1 year, or lifetime. And we use another example as a following on natural disaster. So you have a different beginning point. So that's natural disaster is a good example. And after that, 1 year period of time, and what's the alcohol use disorder rates. So using the 911 as example, so we have 45 people diagnosed with AOD and over 312, so it's a 14% of the prevalence during 1 year. Lifetime is it's any time during their life. And people can count at one. If you diagnose with alcohol disorder at one time, and you are in remission, and that person still counts a case. So that's a lifetime prevalence. So what's the limitations of a prevalence rate? And it often decreases with age, and there are a lot of reasons to talk about it. So in summary, this is a very intuitive illustration about what's incidence. For the new water dripping into the big pool, the pool is the risk population, and how many people have that disease is the blue prevalence. However, what's the difference between prevalence and incidence? And the incidence data will be more valuable for etiology research because it's new cases. You have to follow up, and you should be able to identify the risk factors. And for prevalence, it's more useful for public health and services utilization planning.